When the killer was on a mission, the camera was blocked by the beauty, and he who was training hurriedly moved the scope to the target, but the instinct of the man made him unable to help but take a peek. The killer realized that this would not work, so he quickly stabilized his mind and then looked at the watch. The heart rate was 65. This was when he was in the best condition. Carl grabbed the gun and concentrated his attention. He was ready to kill because he had never failed before. As the rich man reappeared in the field, Carl decided to pull the trigger, but at a critical moment, the beauty suddenly moved her body and caught the bullet. Carl hurried to the court to get another shot, but the bodyguard had already found his shooting point and quickly pulled up the curtain. The best sniper usually has only one chance. Carl quickly took the gun and picked up the garbage on the ground, then put on the helmet and quickly get off the building. The small electric donkey parked in front of the door. When the police car came, Carl had already gone out of the alley and then threw the clip, throw the equipment over the alley to hide the police car, and then throw the helmet into the river at will, and the murder tool will be cleaned up. Then he came to a convenience store and took off his clothes quickly during the time of going to the bathroom, then washed the body as a detail control. He even carefully shaved the beard when he left as sprayed. A lot of perfume and everything was done properly. He went out clean and smooth. After stopping a taxi, Carl rushed straight to the airport. Before he went in, he took out a self-defense pistol, removed the fingerprints on it, and quietly threw it into the trash can. But at the checkpoint, he found a police dog staring at him. Although Carl had cleaned up the smell on his body, he still dared not bet with the dog's nose, so he decided to give up the flight and turn to the bathroom. Before that, I wiped the skin on the outside again and even left the sink. I didn't let go of the details. I decided to live or die. Carl knew that when he assassinated a heavyweight, he would be killed by the killer if he failed. After hanging up the phone, Carl pulled out the phone card and stepped on the phone to prevent himself from being tracked. But even so, Carl got on the plane and didn't let go. He kept an eye on the surroundings and found that there was a man in sunglasses who seemed to be spying on him, so he got off the plane and Carl took out another fake identity and handled the mid-flight transfer. What's funny is that the sunglasses man also handled the transfer, and the two of them ran into each other in the same waiting room. Carl was in the middle of a trash alert, and this guy was probably following him. Carl didn't dare to take the risk and immediately changed to tomorrow morning and stayed at the airport hotel and ordered a dinner. It was determined that after the waiter, Carl carefully stood by the door. I'm sorry, but Carl is not a real man, but he needs some weapons. He puts the glass cup on the door handle and then puts the plate closed to the door so that when the door is pushed open, the glass cup can fall on the plate and make a sound. And then Carl took the knife, sat on the opposite chair, and turned off the light. Fortunately, it was a peaceful night. Back to the Dominican Republic, his car was parked outside the airport, but after getting on the road, he still didn't relax. He kept changing the route and paid close attention not to be in sync with any vehicle. Because once the complaint window may come out of a gun barrel at any time after a whole day of detour, he finally went home. But just at the door, he found that there were 2 big footprints on the ground. This is definitely not the wife's shoes. And there's a bunch of cigarette butts next to the footprints, which means someone used to squat at the door of his house. This style is not a burglar, but a killer. Carl immediately realized that someone was going to assassinate him. So he quickly took out the gun in the car and then turned into the door and ran into the house in the shadow of the tree. As a result, it was found that there were also obvious footprints on the ground near the house, which indicated that the man had entered the house. Carl ran into the house with his back to the inside of the house, playing rock and roll music. The wife was nowhere to be seen. Carl immediately ran to the bedroom, which was full of wolves and blood on the wall. Carl quickly called his wife and found out that his wife was seriously injured and in hospital. When he was alone at home, a man and a woman suddenly broke into the house. There were 2 of them. Very kind to my sister, she loves you. I've learned not to cry. This wasn't a robbery. Little Uncle told Carl that the two of them were cruel to see his sister was about to die, so he took a green taxi and left. Carl listened and immediately transferred his wife to a private hospital and then went home to dig as a special killer. He hid a lot of emergency equipment at home. Well, these wives don't know that after taking the necessary weapons. Carl put on a tourist outfit and drove up the street to look for a green taxi. After finding Carl did not get off the car, but quietly wrote down the company at night. While there were few people, he went to the company to pretend to have an emergency interrogation. And then he stepped back with a sock. The manager opened the door and was shot to death. Finally, Carl entered the control room and checked the driving records of all the taxis. He found a car near his house 2 days ago. I went to his house and I quit the search page, and I found the owner of the car according to the vehicle information. He was a young man with curly hair, and he got all the useful information. But in order to cover up his real purpose, he deliberately messed up the management room and spilled some cash. And then he left. The next morning, Carl was at the door of the garage and he saw the curly hair driving the green taxi, and he followed him right away. After a while, he got out of the car and pretended to be a passenger on the curly hair car and then reported an address. The curly hair was driving with all his heart, but Carl pulled out a gun, and the curly hair was so scared that his brain was flying. "Oh, shit, man. I just started. I'm gonna go ahead. I'll only cook a thing. I just started. I'm gonna go ahead. I'll only cook a thing." They got off the private jet and got into a private house in Thedens Forest. They got out an hour later, and then they rushed to the airport. So it's not clear what they did when they got into the house, although the curly hair told them everything, but the more he said, the faster he died. I don't know who these two are, but his boss must know, because only the boss in the same line knows where his family lives. Finally, Carl boarded the plane with a fake ID card and came to New Orleans. He had 6 warehouses full of military equipment, a handgun, 2 bullets, and a new passport. Carl picked one out of a pile of car plates and put it in the car. Now, except for real guns and real bullets, he's been selling fake goods all the way. The boss lives in a safe and advanced apartment and must use ACCTV to identify the face before entering to open the door. Carl had to dress up as a cleaner and wait outside the apartment. Waiting for the right time to rush in, a courier opened the door and entered. Carl quickly pulled out the ready-made trash can and ran up with him. The courier got off the elevator on the 4th floor, and Carl followed him out because the boss lived on the 4th floor and was single. As the courier opened the 4 doors, Carl began to count to 70. 4 doors are closed, so he has to get into this door and have to see the door open in 7 seconds. Carl hurriedly walked over to sneak a peek and met the boss's secretary first. But a second before the courier came out, Carl had moved to the faucet and pretended to be drinking water. The courier didn't care and just opened the door and left. Speaking of which, it reminds me of a good thing. If you want to fall in love, you can't always meet the girls around you who satisfy your requirements and make your heart flutter. Carl left the trash can outside and only took a gun and a toolbox to see Carl's secretary, who was terrified. But Carl's target was not him, but the old man. "Hey, Carl, take out the rope and let the secretary tie the old man to the chair first, and then tie yourself to the bathroom." But when Carl closed the door, he deliberately left a gap so that he could pay attention to the secretary's movements at any time. In fact, the boss of all kinds of assassination missions, Carl's wife, was hit seriously and was hospitalized because someone asked the old man to place an order because just 2 days ago, Carl assassinated a rich man and failed, so the customer placed an order again. I'm going to give Carl a warning to make sure he works hard next time. Carl wants to know who the customer is, but the old man holds on to the spirit of the contract. God doesn't want to say anything. Carl doesn't want to say anything. He takes out the air gun and stabs his computer and cell phone. Carl doesn't believe that kind of shit. He puts the air gun on the old man. If 3 steel nails get stuck in the chest and can't be pulled out in 6 minutes, they will suffocate and die, the old man said. Even if he was nailed to death, he would not sell the client, but after 3 minutes, the old man fell to the ground in pain. Carl quickly took out a newspaper and carefully placed it under the old man's body to prevent the blood from falling to the ground. I didn't expect the old man, who was smoking secretly, to hold on for less than 6 minutes, and then he died of a sudden heart attack. Carl didn't panic and pushed in the trash can outside and put the old man in. The scene was cleaned up, and then he opened the door of the bathroom, and the secretary was scared and begged him to spare his life, but promise me you won't leave things looking the wrong way. Carl released the secretary and pushed the body into the elevator with him, but at that moment 2 more people entered the elevator, and the secretary dared not ask for help because he knew Carl's cold blood. As long as he moves a little bit, he'll hang up. The secretary took Carl back to his house and found the order to kill him. There were 2 phone numbers on the back of the order, and on the other order, it was the information of the client, Edward. Carl knew what he wanted. The secretary thought he would let himself go, but when he got down the stairs, Carl quickly took action and broke the secretary's neck. It looks like a corpse falling off a building. And then Carl pulls the old man's body to his own warehouse, and the 140-pound old man is put in a 10-story vinegar barrel and finally returned. To the sea, Carl washed the car thoroughly and then changed the license plate and set out to look for Biao Ge. Compared to being someone else's prey, he was more suitable for being a hunter. After arriving at the destination, Carl rented a car with a fake identity and then went to Biao Ge's house to pick up the dots. After discovering that Biao Ge had a big wolf dog, he bought him steak, sleeping pills, and malt wine. At night, Carl touched the dog near Biao Ge's house and immediately noticed that he was in a frenzy, but after Carl greeted him with soaked malt, wine, and sleeping pills, the dog ignored him. Then Carl entered the front door in a panic. Seeing that the dog had entered the dream, Carl was more at ease, but as soon as he walked into the room, Biao Ge launched an attack. Carl was hit by a blunt. Biao Ge's muscles are all over the place, and it's obvious that he's a professional hero, but Carl is destined to suffer, so he grabs the iron hook next to the bed and hooks it into Biao Ge's muscles. But who would have thought that this man was also a tough guy? Carl couldn't resist the fire and ran into the room just now and found the gun at the bottom of the bed. At this time, the opponent just caught up with him at the door, but the next second, Carl successfully killed Biao Ge. But the gunshot also woke up the dog, who had no dream and realized that he was greedy for food and lost his job. The dog rushed into the room with guilt. The dog was about to bite him, but Carl cleverly jumped out, and then he lit the torch and threw it at the house. Although the dog is a witness, Carl believes he won't say a word more. Carl cleaned himself up in the bathroom, at the airport, and pretended to kill Mian Qianji. After locking the target, he followed the target all the way and found that the other party went to a Western restaurant for a date, and Carl went in boldly because a woman was killed, and the first person to be suspected was her husband or boyfriend, so Carl had nothing to fear. He took advantage of Mian Qianjie's boyfriend's going to the bathroom and sat in his seat and quickly pulled out his gun. Mian Qianjie was stunned, and he knew that he was going to die tonight. So he asked for the last dinner. Carl still has this kind of personality, but then Mian Qianjie asked for 3 steps to walk the last few steps of life in a romantic way, but Carl suddenly shot him. He's a straight man killer who doesn't have any emotional cells, and he's a fast man.